Last week I put out an episode which was all around how to recruit your perfect podcast team, and it was one of the best episodes that I've done in terms of engagement. People were asking question after question after question. In particular, a friend of mine and a long-time listener, Danny Brown, sent me an email saying, Marco, that's all well and good, my man, but how the heck do you do that if you're a small show and you've not got that much money? So that is what I'm going to discuss today here on the Podcast Accelerator. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, CEO and co-founder of Rebel Base Media, the tech platform company that builds all sorts of podcasting solutions, including, of course, Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. Now, I'm at Social Media Marketing World. I'm sat quite literally on the floor. If you look at my Instagram story right now, at Mr. Asquith, look at my Instagram story. I'm sat on the floor recording this episode here at Social Media Marketing World. I'm kind of sat on the floor because I didn't want to hinder anyone. There's all these tables and people working and got their heads down, and all the sessions are kicking off in a little while, and I really didn't want to bother anyone. So if you hear people walking past, if you hear bells ringing, people whooping and all sorts of crazy stuff, you might even hear a bit of a reggae band from what I can see, some kettle drums and a bass player setting up. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I love a good bass player. So, look, we are going to dig into that in just a second from Mr. Danny Brown. But before I do that, just a quick reminder that the show is brought to you by the wonderful team at AWeber. Someone that I do a lot of work with is Brandon from AWeber. In fact, I'm hitting dinner with Brandon tonight. We're going to be spending some time talking about how AWeber can continue to help podcasters and how we can continue to help AWeber. And it's just amazing to be able to work with people that really care about platforms and really care about you, the podcaster. So look, if you're thinking, why can't I engage my audience as easy as you seem to be able to do, Mark, or why are all these other podcasters able to build these email lists? Trust me, put AWeber at the center of your marketing strategy for your podcast and watch how things change, all right? Go and check AWeber out, markasquith.com/AWeber. Now, let's talk podcasting team. So Danny said, look, he said, this is a really great episode that you put out. But how do you do that if you're a small show and you've not got a pile to invest in it? How do you go about recruiting your team? Like, where do you start? What do you do? And it got me thinking, because Danny sent me this in last week, and I've been fortunate enough to potter about, and I've been in San Diego for a while just working, and I've had some headspace to be able to think about this one, Danny, and it really got me thinking about how I, number one, at Rebel Base Media, working on Captivate and podcast websites, Podcast Success Academy, but also back in the day, like back in the Hacksaw agency days, like what did we do for clients? And it was a really interesting perspective to kind of revisit what we used to do, Danny. So what I would suggest, dude, is that you've got to figure out where your weaknesses are. So I said last week on the episode, if you can afford to outsource something, don't outsource the things that you don't mind doing. So like I said last week, many people would outsource the editing. But if you don't mind doing the editing, just crack on with that and outsource something that you either aren't very good at, or you don't know about, or you hate doing, okay? So take that one step further. How do you test the market? How do you figure out whether you've got the right people? How do you understand whether or not you have the right budget going to the right places? Well, what I would suggest is, number one, you have to find a specialist in the thing that you have a gap in. So what I'm talking about here is you don't go to a company that will promise and profess to do everything for you. There are rarely any all-in-one services unless you're a corporate hiring an agency, because then the agency just outsources to specialists, all right? That's how it works. They'll have internal teams, but anything that they don't do, they will just outsource to specialists. That's the way of the world, okay? What you've got to get savvy with here, Danny, is that you need to be saying, right, okay, let's assume you've got a problem with marketing. You need to hire a channel specialist. So when I say channel, what I'm talking about is an Instagram specialist, a Facebook specialist, a paid ads specialist, a Twitter specialist, a growth specialist, someone that specializes in one channel. Work with them to define, look, here are my goals. I'm Danny. This is my podcast. I need to grow my listener base. What can you do as an Instagram channel specialist to prove to me that we can grow my listeners? Because that's the goal. It's not to increase your activity on Instagram or Twitter. Like, if you do that and you increase your followers but nothing happens to your podcast, it's a wasted spend. So what you got to understand is that you're trying to define, look, how can this channel specialist help me? And then what you've got to do is say, right, we're going to pick one thing. We're not going to try and hire everyone to do everything or one person to be all in one. We're going to hire one person to do one thing for us, and we're going to put parameters on it. Okay, we're going to say, how much are we intending to increase our listener base by? How are we going to do that, and what are the timings that we're going to use to do that? So these SMART objectives that I always talk about: specific, measurable, attainable, results-driven, and time-based. So, dear Mr. Instagram, and I'm using Instagram as an arbitrary example, Danny, so don't take this as something that you should do right out of the bat. You've got to research it, you've got to think about it, okay? Go to your Instagram specialist and say, look, I want to increase my downloads of my show by 20% over the next 3 months. I feel Instagram might be a channel to do that. You give me a proposal. Here's my budget. This is me asking you for a proposal. That's the specifics. I want a measurable outcome of 20% growth. Is that attainable? Yes. Is it results driven? Of course it is, because that is the outcome that I want to achieve. Is it time based? Yes, I want to do that within 3 months. Okay, Mr. Instagram expert or Mrs. Instagram expert, give me a proposal that links to that. Can you do that? Let's put a time-bound budget on it, so we are not going to spend any more than this, and we're not going to drag this on unless we can measure it after that 3 months and get the results, okay? You have got to be willing to lose that money in order to win, okay? Now, that sounds flippant. It sounds a bit stupid, but this is an investment in your show. You've got to understand that just like any investment, there's a risk associated with it, okay? So you can't put money into it that you can't afford to spend, okay? As long as you can afford to spend the budget that you set, this is a good way to go about it, Danny. So that's what I would suggest. Find a specialist and work with them on a specific, measurable, attainable, results-driven, time-bound project that is not ongoing. It's not a retainer. It's a fixed price project. Look at that investment, allocate some budget, and look at what the results are. And if the results happen, look at what you can optimize, look at how you can keep doing that, how you can scale those results, okay? Because ultimately, if you can increase your downloads by 20%, you might be happy to reinvest to increase it by another 20% or 15% or 30%, okay? But you have to understand what that project looks like. So, what I'm going to do is that's how you allocate a small amount of money to a results-driven project. Okay, that's how you do that, Danny. What I'm also going to do after that is I'm going to go ahead and speak to Larry. So Larry put in an episode request about how you go about vetting these people, how you go about finding these people. So on Wednesday's episode, the next episode, Larry, I'm going to answer your question, which is kind of a 1-2 to yours, Danny. All right, so I'm going to dig into both aspects of how do you define the project, which is what we've just done. Number 2, how do we find the people? Okay, how do we find people that aren't just selling snake oil? All right, so we're going to do that on the next episode. So this is not easy. You know, now we're getting into the realms of the day-to-day, dirty little marketing stuff that we've got to do. Like, this is not easy stuff to do, but it's important, all right? You become the CEO of a podcast business when you start to do this. You become the person commissioning. You become the agency. You become the project manager. You become the person that's commissioning everything, all right? And that's what you need to think about as yourself. You know, you're not just the host and the creator of the show. You are the CEO of your podcast brand. And the CEO is responsible for everything, okay? Ultimately, the buck stops with me, CEO of Rebel Based Media. Doesn't matter what goes wrong, the buck stops with me, okay? It's up to me, okay? It's the CEO of your podcast brand, commissioning marketing. As a small business, commissioning marketing where you don't have a CMO, you don't have a head of marketing, that falls to you, all right? So, Danny, anyone else that's listening out there that wants more insight on that, hit me up on Twitter at Mr. Asquith. Email me, Mark, M-A-R-K, at rebelbasedmedia.io. If you want to jump on my email list, if you want to make sure that you're getting all of these new episodes, or if you want to make sure you can reply to me quickly and easily, or if you want the 9 unconventional ways to grow your podcast, go to markasquith.com/grow. And if you're at Social Media Marketing World, come along, let's get a beer, all right? So until Podfest next week, where I'm hoping to see even more of you amazing podcasters, thank you for listening. Never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel. Adios.